A lot of you ask me how I transition my garden from season to season, especially since I love to pack in the plants and grow more of the year than most people do. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how I transition a garden from cool season into warm season in a way that most people don't do. So let's get started. Hey there, my name is Nicole Burke. I'm the author of a book. I still can't believe that. It's called Kitchen Garden Revival. If you haven't checked it out, we've got a link to it right below. But in the book, I actually build this kitchen garden step by step from the ground up. Today it is June 1st and my beds are packed. Literally, I can't hardly see the soil in any part of my 6 beds. I have about 90 square feet here. And I've been growing in the cool season for about 2 months now. We're about 60 days in. So what that means is a lot of my plants are ready for harvest. I've been harvesting from them over the last few weeks. But it also means that it's now time to be planting for the warm season. So we finally passed the frost date a couple weeks ago. We dipped down into the 40s last week. So you're going to see a little bit of frost damage on some of my warm season plants. But I want to show you how I start to transition my garden without pulling everything out. So a lot of times if you watch farmers or row gardeners or any kind of gardeners, sometimes they do like a full clean sweep and then they install a whole new season of plants. Well, for me, I really love soil coverage. Whenever the soil is covered in my gardens, this means I don't have to water as often. I don't have to be afraid or worried about weeds. And it also means that my plants get more support and insulation that they need. So what I like to do is do a slow transition. And there are actually a lot of plants in the garden right now that will stay all through the whole summer and fall in my garden, even though they went in March. So we'll talk through the things that are staying and then how I'm transitioning. So I came in a couple weeks ago and I have these little spots. So I'm growing these Napa cabbages, they're head cabbages, and I'm growing them pretty compactly. So I came in between each plant and I added my pepper plants. Now I just took my hori-hori, dug down, did a nice deep hole, and planted 1, 2, 3 pepper plants right here among my cabbages. So I've got this nice healthy interplanting. I've got cabbages still growing. I harvest these as needed. And then I've got these warm season plants of peppers growing alongside them as well. Now in this garden, there's also some things that will not move. So the cabbages will come out, but the Swiss chard and the kale will not. These plants are cool season plants, but they're also biennials, which means they'll stay in the garden throughout the entirety of the summer and well into the fall. So these will stay. The cabbages will eventually move out, and then I can replace the cabbages with other peppers or other warm season plants as soon as I pull them. But meanwhile, we've got these peppers that are really well insulated. They've got plenty of support. They're not drying out and they're getting plenty of sunlight. These plants are tall enough that they've kind of passed the cabbages and their leaves are getting as much sun as they need to. Maybe not as much, but plenty. Then moving on, I have an eggplant here. Now this eggplant suffered a little bit of frost damage, but I've never done an eggplant in my front beds before. So I tucked this one in. Now I can tell this one isn't getting as much sun. You can see the kale is casting a shadow on this. So what I can do is just simply when I come in to cut my kale for smoothies, I can make sure I cut the leaves that are shading this the most. So I can prioritize these leaves to cut until I can see a good amount of sunlight on the eggplant leaf to make sure it's getting what it needs. Now in a short while, this eggplant is going to rise up and be bigger and taller than all these other plants. And at that point, I won't need to worry about it getting enough sunlight. Now on my trellises, I have my peas growing, my sugar snap peas, and they're still doing really well. They haven't even started to form flowers or peas yet. They're kind of slow this season, honestly. But right below them, you can see I've already added my tomato plants. So if you follow along, I have a whole series on growing tomatoes on arched trellises. This is my favorite thing to do with tomatoes. So I go ahead and plant these as plants even alongside the peas. The peas have a very small root structure. They don't need a ton of room underground. So I just simply let them be, and I just come in here right below and plant these tomatoes. So I dug a nice deep hole, planted my tomatoes, and they're growing here right alongside my peas. Now, as soon as the peas finish, I will cut them from the base, kind of tug them out of the trellis, and then let my tomatoes do their thing. That'll happen probably in about a month's time. So these peas need about 30 more days to finish up, and that'll be perfect timing for the tomatoes as they start to really flower and fruit, because at that point they'll be about 45, 50 days in the ground. So I've got tomatoes, eggplants, peppers right alongside my cool season plants of cabbages and peas, radishes, and celery. So next I want to show you the next two beds and how I'm adding a structure to move me from cool season to warm season. So let's go back to these two beds. All right, so in these beds, we have mostly greens. I have dinosaur kale that's back here, or Toscano kale. Then I've got lots of lettuce here in the center. And then you can see along the edge here, I've got carrots growing. Now, these lettuces are starting to finish up. In fact, I just harvested some today, and it's pretty evident that some of these plants are starting to bolt. So these lettuces at best probably have another 10, 15 days of life in them. So I'll be harvesting and eating from them often. But in the meanwhile, I wanted to go ahead and get my warm season plants started in this garden. So as I mentioned, we had a little bit of frost on these plants. But you can see what I did is came in and I planted cucumbers right alongside my lettuce plants. So I just went in any place that I had a little blank spot, and I just placed the cucumber plants right alongside the lettuces. Now these cucumbers, you can see, are already producing a little tendril. These need something to climb on. These are pole cucumbers. So I'm going to show you just a simple structure I'm going to add to the garden now that I did not need in the cooler season. I'm going to show you what I'm going to add here. So I'll be right back. All right, so today I'm adding these Obelisk Trellises. I used these last summer and they were super successful. This provides a nice growing structure for my cucumbers. You can do pole beans on these, tomatoes, or cucumbers. Any kind of trellis, any kind of plant that needs a trellis, an obelisk is a great kind of support to use. So I'm going to be adding this. I'm going to have 3 down the center on this bed and on the other bed, and I'm going to use these to support my cucumbers. So as I put this in, basically I'm going to be sure that I'm not damaging the cucumber plant. Now I could have done this, you know, probably the better time would be to do it right as I plant the cucumbers, but I was still needing to cover for frost. So I left these supports, oops, kind of damaging my plants a little bit here. So this is what I've been using. These are my hoops I've been using for my frost supports. And I'm not gonna need these as much now, thankfully. Now I could still use them for pest protection, but I'm gonna pull these out. Maybe I'll move them to the side a little bit so that I have more room for my trellis. So what I like to do with my trellis is put them down at least far enough so that they don't topple over. So I'm gonna try to line this up with my cucumber plants. And a great thing about here, so I usually can see on my bed, I have a screw right in the center of the bed. So I usually try to line up my trellis right with the center, which I think I did pretty well. So I'm gonna station this in here, and I'm literally just going down over my lettuce plants, which is pretty crazy, right? But I'm just gonna kind of push, 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 making sure I don't damage. I can tell the cucumber plant is a little too inside, so I'm going to move this to either side. So these are going to work out perfectly. See how the tendrils can just grab? You can already see how this one's kind of starting to wilt because it wasn't finding a home. So I'm going to push these down. I try to get it at least down 6 inches into the bed to make sure it's not going to move, and then I straighten it up. So I've got 6 of these trellises. These are actually in the Gardenary shop, super strong, and this has made it through actually the full summer last summer, And then all of the Chicago winter, I kept these in my front yard. So I think they're doing pretty awesome. No signs of rust or wear and tear or anything yet. So, so this is how we transition. So in this bed earlier, you know, if I wasn't growing peas, there's really no need to have a tall structure here in this bed. But now that we're moving on to cucumbers and vining plants, that's a key way to transition from cool to warm, is to add some new climbing structures. So I'll add 2 more, one for the cucumbers back here and one for these. And then I'll do 3 on that side as well. So I'll have 6 new trellises for about 12 cucumber plants. So pretty awesome. And that's generally the way that I like to transition a garden from cool season to the warm season without pulling everything out. So I'll let these plants continue to grow. My dinosaur kale will stay. The carrots are gonna need probably the rest of the summer to finish. They will probably finish in July, maybe early August. These lettuces will eventually come out and I can add some other kind of cover here. I could do bush beans. I can do some other kind of seeded plant that's going to grow faster than my larger plants. And I'll just keep kind of transitioning a little bit at a time. So this is a different way to grow in your garden rather than doing everything at once, planting everything at once, taking everything out at once. The way I prefer to grow in the garden is to take a little here, a little there, always be planting something new and always be harvesting something. That's what keeps me interested in the garden and honestly coming out here again and again. So I hope this inspires you to make the most of every season you have in the kitchen garden. I talk all about seasonal gardening in my book, Kitchen Garden Revival. So again, you can check that out at the link below in this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next season, or actually before that. Thanks for watching. Bye.